Well, it's a real shame that Mr. Hogan isn't around with us today, especially as much talk as there is about his golf swing and what people feel he did in his golf swing, and so much speculation and lore about him that it's a shame that we don't have him around today to use the high-speed video and all the great tools that we have these days to analyze his swing and look at what he actually did. And today I'm going to talk about one of the things that I find to be pretty much the biggest misconception about Hogan's swing, is that he hung on his left side, that he had kind of a reverse pivot, etc., etc. So, and a lot of this comes into play today as we talk about golf swings that are considered to be, kind of in vogue, or new ideas about the golf swing, such as the stack and tilt, the one plane swing, things like this that have been around for a long time, but are just now getting to be known in the public eye. So we're going to talk about this today, and I've got a video here of a golfer on the right who's a student taking an online lesson, and unfortunately has probably been misfed some of this bad information. And we're going to show what actually does happen in Hogan's swing on the left. So I'm going to start out first with a couple of lines. One at the back of the ball. This is something I talk about in all the videos. When we talk about address position, we talk about the back of the ball and the left ear. Basically, at address, it's pretty much where it should be. Obviously, there's some adjustable fluctuation there for shorter clubs and different shots and so on and so forth. But that's kind of the de facto standard, because the bottom of the swing arc is going to be right about the inside of this armpit here. So at the left arm, just in front of the ball, it's where we want the ball, the bottom of the swing arc to bottom out, and that's where the deepest part of our divot's going to be. Now, one of the things that we're going to really focus on in this video is where Hogan was as he went to the top of his swing, because everybody feels there's a general consensus that Hogan hung on his left side and had kind of reverse pivot and so on and so forth. Not true. Going to talk about it right now. So first off, notice that Hogan has a tiny amount of spine tilt, tiny amount, mostly because his right arm's below his left, but just a tiny amount away from the target. Now, it's very, very subtle. It's very, very little, but you can see by looking at the buttons on his shirt that they're angled. Oh, change this. They're angled just slightly away from the target. Very subtle. If you're looking at it here, I'm measuring that to be just a few degrees past vertical. So, very, very, more upright feeling at address. Not a lot of tilt away from the target. But here's what we're going to do as we go back. I'm going to draw one more line at the back of his right hip. And this is where things really can be seen. A lot of people feel that he moved away from the target as he was going in his backswing and moved more weight onto his left leg. Well, we're going to see that here. So that red line is right on the edge of his right hip. Notice how his right hip is perfectly smashed up against that right line. Now, if he was to move his weight onto his lead leg, his left leg, as he was going back, he simply wouldn't do that. He would be moving away from that line, as you can see here during the transition, as he was going back. Now, on our student here on the right, we're going to draw that same line right outside the right hip. Oops. Move that over. So right on the right hip. Now, as he goes back, notice how he actually moves out in front of it and gets his spine actually leaning toward the target. Now, the reason I use this swing, he's not actually moving his hips toward the target, but what he is doing is trying to stay really, really centered and get his spine feeling more on top of the ball and more vertical. And you can see as he gets to the top of his swing that his spine's actually leaning toward the target. This is more of a reverse pivot, and when this happens, when the belt buckle moves out from under you, your hips move out from under you, and you try to keep your head in place, well, your spine's going to tilt this way. So one's going to move this direction, the other's going to move this direction. And that's what's happening here. And now he's going to slide way out in front of it, and he's going to flip it. He doesn't really have much of a choice from that position. As you can see, the ideal position is staying on that line, turning around your spine. You can see Hogan's spine angle. The top of his swing is identical to where it was at address. And if we look at this, this is the interesting part. Notice how he has the appearance of having a slight tilt away from the target. All right, so we draw another line here, and so let me change the color of that. So now we can see that Hogan, well, that didn't do a lot of good. How about yellow? Now we can see that Hogan, if he had a necktie on, this is one of the things I always talk about. Let me delete a couple lines here, make it easier to see. If he had a necktie on, it would tend to hang over his right knee. Now, a lot of people think that your spine should be completely vertical at this point or leaning toward the target, but as I mentioned here, you can see when that happens, when your spine's leaning toward the target, your hips are going to bump out, and then he's going to have a big lateral move, and unfortunately he's way out in front of the ball.